as well. All right, so let's begin. My intention is to make this about 45 minutes, so it's not too much of an investment of your time. We've got someone from France, 1 a.m. Wow. Ah, yes. Is that Coralie Lemonnier? How lovely to see you back. So Coralie's one of someone who did my course in Bali, and wow, she's here at 1 in the morning. I'm impressed. And Andrea, in a chrysalis disintegration. Yes, okay, well, chrysalis is a nice expression, isn't it? Because it really is all about metamorphosis. Is this year going to be the time when we see metamorphosis on an individual level and a systemic level? But of course, if we're going to create great systems, it begins with metamorphosis on the individual level. And that's what I am all about. All right, so let's look at what that might look like for you. And just to check in with you, just to begin by asking some questions. I'm curious to know, and just put in the chat if this is a yes for you. When you look back on your life and you see what you've achieved to this point, does part of you say, yes, but, you know, it feels like the puzzle is not yet complete. There's another piece and I'm not really sure what it is. Just put yes in the chat if that, yes, but, yeah, exactly. It's a lot of us, I describe myself as a serial entrepreneur. A lot of us come from a space where we've exerted a lot of energy to get to where we are. And now we're starting to wonder, what's the result of all of this? You know, why is part of me still feeling like I haven't quite made it? Yeah, thanks, Coralie. Thanks, Tanya. Okay, all right. So if that's you, you're definitely in the right place. The other thing that I come across a lot when I talk to people is how you're showing up now and where you actually want to be are two different things. But the question is why? What is the origin of that gap? What is the cause behind it? Why can we simply not be that great productive person that we want to be? And I'm really going to drill down into that today. Yeah, Andrew uses puzzles as an analogy often, yeah. And we are a puzzle, and we're made up of many pieces. I think we're probably like the equivalent of a 200,000 piece puzzle. And the question is, how do we put ourselves together so we can see a clear picture of who we are? And specifically, even if you don't relate to either of those first two, but you're having any type of issue in, let's call them the main areas of our life, whether it's money, health, relationships, quality of life, energy levels, there's usually a reason for that, and I'm going to share with you what I believe that reason to be, and feel free to disagree with me at any point along the way. All right, so on that subject, welcome everyone to this masterclass, how your core destructive belief is sabotaging every aspect of your life and what you can do about it. So the question I find people asking a lot when they get to this stage in their life is, you've had a certain amount of experience, you've done a lot, probably, you know, suffered a lot in many ways, and then it's like, well, what now? How do I cross this threshold? I kind of have a sense of where I want to get to, but I have no idea how to get there. And I can tell you, I stayed in this what now space for about 10 years. And it was very frustrating. And that 10-year decade is probably what's prompted me to do what I do right now, to spare other people what would I call it, a state of limbo. We all know how uncomfortable limbo is. So the good news is that there is actually a formula for get you from this sense of living life at half-mast, you know, not being fully there, not operating at your peak capacity, you know, whatever that is, being curious to know what that is. And I'm an ex-advertising person. I really understand the value of time. I've been forced to compress messages to a 3-second billboard. My interest is not in making this a prolonged process at all. 10 years is a ridiculous amount of time to be spending figuring ourselves out. In fact, I think 1 year is too long, and I like to get it down to not years or months, but actually weeks, if not days. That's my whole aim in all of this work, without compromising the quality of the shift. Many people have said to me, I don't know that you can do this, and my greatest delight is in proving them wrong. So before we go into this, though, I'd just like to thank you for coming along. I understand for some of you it's a crazy time of day, but it's not even that. It's more the fact that your curiosity has brought you here, and the willingness that you show to give that curiosity expression and find out more about yourself. Because I still believe, unfortunately, the number of people who are willing to confront themselves and go, well, maybe the issue isn't about COVID that I'm facing right now. Maybe it's another issue. Maybe it's something more to do with me, still falls into the vast minority. So the fact that you're here, I really appreciate that for showing up. And accordingly, I'll do my best to make sure you get something, some insight that's made this investment of time worth your while. So let's begin with the specifics. What are we going to discover today? Here's what this is all about. I'm going to share with you a model called the 5 doors. And this is actually the overarching name of my program. It's the 5th door. I've spent my whole life trying to get to the 5th door without even realizing what it was. But I think, you know, like any journey that we take, we can get kind of fixated on the end destination. But before we can do that, we actually have to know our departure point. And specifically behind that, what got us to this place where we're at now. So I'll give you some clarity on that according to this model, where you feel you are right now. And then after that, this is something that's really driven me crazy. It's well named the crazy loop. I'm going to explain to you what that actually means and why this form of entrapment is something that affects every one of us. I do believe it is the human journey, how it might apply to you, and then how you can actually break this circuit. And I'm happy to, I don't call myself so much of a coach or even a facilitator, but a circuit breaker. My whole intention is to help you break out of this crazy loop by learning how to break this circuit that's keeping all of us, it is the human destiny in a sense, to stay stuck until we can understand what it is that's keeping us stuck and repeating pattern behaviors that don't suit us. And then finally, a proven path for identifying this thing that I'm going to talk more about in a second that goes way beyond limiting beliefs. It's way deeper than that, and that's why I call it the core destructive belief. So if this sounds of interest to you, I just want to make sure that these topics are of interest to you. If you could just put 3 in the chat, or however many of these topics you're interested in. If it's only one, just put 1 or 2 or 3. I just want to know that what I'm sharing has some kind of relevance to where you're at right now. Okay, thanks guys. 3. Yep, excellent. And Carly too, great. Yeah, Carly and I've done some work together actually. All right, thank you everyone too. Good. All right, well, at least I know that there'll be something out of this that you're going to find interesting. Okay, so let's begin. Which door are you, I'm going to say stuck behind. That might be putting a bit of a negative slant on it. Maybe for me it was which door am I hiding behind, if I was to look back on my life. But in hindsight, it definitely was a sense of stuckness. So what I'd like you to do is to pick the number 1 issue in your life right now that you'd like some resolution about. You know, it might be money. It might be how you spend your time, your career. It might be relationships. It might be something less tangible. It might be like energy level, for instance. So just have in your mind whatever is the most important thing that you'd like to get some resolution about right now. And then as I describe each of these doors, start to relate back to them and go, yep, I'm behind that door, okay? So this is where we're defining our departure point. All right, I'm going to start with the door that no one wants to even acknowledge mostly. Don't we see this out there? And I call it living hell. And this is the door that most of us spend most of our time, if not all of our time, running away from. Now, the problem with that is whatever we run away from, we tend to manifest, unfortunately. So it's very important that we know and can identify, articulate, what does this mean for you? So, you know, in a worst case scenario, is it bankruptcy? Is it total social isolation? Is it chronic disease? You know, if health is an issue for you, for instance, what is your definition of living hell? And just assess if this is where you're at right now. I know I've been behind this door and stuck here for months. And it's a place where if we're in denial, it tends to come and follow us. So that's doorway 1, right? Doorway 2, I call the treadmill. And this is a life of compliance. All right, so, you know, typically it would be someone spending just having a 9 to 5 job, obeying all the rules, not taking any risk, not really listening to that inner voice, just doing whatever it is that your system society requires. You know, in a relationship sense, it might be just staying in a relationship which you kind of know is wrong, but you just don't want to break out of it, or a career which you know is wrong, but you just want to, you know, not rock the boat. So that's the treadmill. Doorway 2. Fortunately, there are 3 other doors. Doorway 3, I call a roller coaster. And this is where we've broken away in some way. We've expressed through an act of whether courage or recklessness or impulsivity, we've gone, you know what, I'm going to make more of my life. I'm going to go out there and do whatever it takes to express myself as a, you know, entrepreneur or whatever. We've taken risk. But the assumption might have been that it was going to be a bit more smooth sailing than it's turned out to be. And instead of that, you know, stairway to heaven, it feels more like an up and down ride. And as much as we would like to find some sense of balance on this path, it's almost like we're being torn from one point to another all the time, as if life is happening beyond our control. Okay, so that's roller coaster. And then doorway 4, this is a really interesting door. So I call this pipe dream after the opium dens in China, you know, where people would smoke opium and in a kind of delusional state seek out their version of paradise. And so door 4 is when you finally get to what you always wanted. I'll preface that by saying to what you thought you wanted, when what you thought you wanted was not actually what the real you wanted, but society's definition of success. So I was very fortunate to get to this door, and a lot of my clients are behind this door. So in other words, you have everything that you always worked so hard for, whether it's, you know, the big house, the family, you know, the great marriage, whatever, assets in the bank. And then it doesn't turn out to be quite the wonderful place, the mountaintop that you are necessarily looking for. I'm going to go more into this in a second. So that begs the question, is this all there is? Fortunately, no. There is a 5th option, what I call the 5th door, which really begs description. It's really a state of being beyond words. But if I was to describe it, I would say it really is where you've hit your sweet spot, where through self-knowledge, really understanding who you are, what makes you tick, the things that have been holding you back, you know, the gifts in your past, the potential of your future, you can actually express that in a way that you are doing what you really love, you know, finding your joy. And I tell you what, it's harder than it looks. And then putting it out there for something that is bigger than you, a cause or something that you believe in. And I'm not talking about becoming an altruist or a charity worker or a volunteer. It's not about that. If anything, it's a reflection of noble selfishness, where you are doing what you do, just as I'm doing what I'm doing today, because it's what I want to do. I'm not doing it for anyone else, but I'm driven by something bigger than me, which allows me to show up. So of those 5 models, let's just take a quick look at them. We have living hell, and applying these to the biggest issue for your life going on right now. Treadmill, roller coaster, pipe dream, the 5th door, we'll just call it your sweet spot for now. Where do you think you are at this current point in time? Are you behind 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? I'm just going to say there is no shame in any of this, because it is our job as a living, breathing human to spend time behind every one of these doors at some point in our life. I'm just curious to know where you are. So where do you think you are in this particular aspect? And leave 5, that's fabulous. Yeah, I can see you're someone who's, there are certain people who have a mission, a sense of mission about them. They're mission driven, but that's very different from having a savior complex. I probably won't go into that in this call, but the sweet spot is not about trying to save the world. All right, Jess, 5, yes, I know. We've worked together as well. Yeah, really feeling that you're making a contribution to the world. Bruno, 4, interesting. Yeah, maybe, exactly. Sometimes it's not that clear to us. Andrea, 4. And behind the 5th, but still have to wait 3 months and get crazy about that. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, because you've got a sense of where you are, All right, so let me just tell you a little bit about me. This is not a brag slide, quite the opposite. I feel quite schizophrenic when I look at it, but I just think it's important you know my path. So I call myself a serial entrepreneur. We've run 6 different businesses over the years, including 2 restaurants. I had a brief stint in acting, which is actually a path I could have gone down. I got offered some amazing roles, but I ended up saying no. I didn't have a lot of self-knowledge back then, but I had enough just to know that wasn't my path. But from there went into advertising. Thanks, Bill. Yeah, so you're finding you're vacillating between those doors. Yeah, that's very common. Advertising, ran an advertising agency in Sydney, which was very successful. Certainly not my calling though. Did a big $23 million real estate development up in North Australia. Bought, sold and renovated 117 properties, and then finished with the wedding business in Australia and Bali. When I look at this, I feel exhausted, honestly. And none of these was what I was supposed to be doing, but each one gave me huge learning. But today I really do feel that I've arrived at the point that I need to get to, teaching this. And honestly, not to be too dark about this, but if I did die tomorrow, I would be okay. But it certainly wasn't always like that. Okay, so let's just, given that this isn't really about me, but about you guys, maybe one of the best things I can do is just share for you what this inner work can actually look like. What are the fruits of this labor of going inside? And I feel it's important that you understand this, because so many times I hear an assumption of this inner work is all too hard, you know, or it takes too long, or I just don't have the time. So let's just get to the bottom of that. Rather than quote facts and figures, I'll just take you through a case study. So this is Jamin, a lovely fellow who I worked with late last year, and he was like classic door 4. So a very successful speaker, he'd written 8 books, a bit like me, he was a human doing on steroids. His whole theme was running a program called Network Like a Rock Star. He's originally from the US, based in Bali for a little while. Where his life was at, he was tearing around the globe, and just that time away, being so busy, was putting a strain on his marriage. And interestingly, money was still an issue. So it wasn't even as if all that hard work was bringing great returns. So we went through this process, which I'll share with you in a second, where we have to establish our core need, because our core need becomes like our North Star. And what he realized, the thing that was missing most for him, actually, despite all the good work that he was putting out there, was self-love. And so the challenge was, how do I reinvent myself? What can I do with my career where I can actually develop self-love? Now, self-love for many people is a woo-woo concept. It's like, yeah, I don't want to know about that. But listen, I've spent 40 years not loving myself, and particularly not loving what I do, to know that if you put yourself last in any sort of way, if you don't take yourself seriously, it comes at a huge cost. And the whole concept of having self-love is probably one of the healthiest ambitions you can have, because only good things flow from it. So what happened in Jamin's case? Well, interestingly, by changing the lens that he was looking through life, he actually found his passion. And his passion actually wasn't so much about networking. That might have suited him when he was young and single, right? But now it was more about conscious parenting. So now he's launched a program called the Integrated Father. And interestingly, the pivot he's done, working from home suits him so well. So COVID's been a blessing, as it is, I suspect, for many of us. And he's replaced that stressful high travel career with working from home, focusing on the relationships that matter. Now, can you see how this is starting to help him satisfy his core need? But not only that, in fulfilling his core need, and this is the game changer, your core need becomes what you have to give to others. So once you become clear on your core need, you can actually understand the secret to your gift. And this is what 99.9% of the world has no idea on. So this is the interesting thing. When you are in your zone, in that sweet spot, money comes as a consequence, but it's never the goal, right? And so he's making 40 grand a month, just doing what he loves, working from home. How much has his life turned around in that short space of time? So he always had what it took. He always had that It was just a matter of unearthing it. So why am I here talking to you today? I'll just give you a little bit of my background, and I wonder if any of you relate to this. So back in the 80s, there was a mantra. I'd say most of you in this room are too young to remember this time, but definitely it was about materialism. It was I think it was a reaction to our Depression era parents. And the mantra was, the harder I work, the more money I'll make, the more money I make, the happier I'll be. Just put yes in the chat if that's ever been your mantra, if that's been the bait on the end of your fishing line that you've gone and thrown into the ocean of the world, because it was certainly a driver for me, yeah. So, and who can blame us? It's the environment that we've been born into that suggests that that's true. So I was very lucky. I did get everything I thought I wanted. The waterfront mansion, we built this. We built 6 kilometers of road to get there. Private beach next door, framed by palm trees. A beautiful family, 3 daughters, rock solid marriage, money in the bank. And I'll never forget that day. I was sitting in a kayak looking at everything we owned, right? You know, 100 meters of pure waterfront, everything we'd always wanted. And all I felt was emptiness. And I went, oh my God, I've spent my whole life climbing this mountain to reach the top, and realized it was the wrong one. So the problem is, because I didn't take action, I didn't know how. The universe took it for me, and the following year delivered the global financial crisis. So over the space of about 12 months, I watched as just about everything that we'd worked so hard for disappear. And the problem with that was, because my whole sense of self-worth was tied up in my net worth, it was like I was watching myself disappear. You know, it was like I was seeing a finger being chopped off every day until there was virtually none of me left. And I'll never forget listening to this story or hearing a story on the news about a German industrialist who was worth not millions but billions, and how he dealt with his loss was throwing himself in front of a train. But the point I want to make is, I didn't feel compassion or empathy. I couldn't feel that. I was just obsessed by one thought: if only that was me. And so I don't know if any of you have ever hit that ground zero point, but when you do, I believe death is inevitable. It's really, what type of death do you choose? You know, do you choose physical death, where you check out, but you leave behind all the pain and suffering for those loved ones, family and friends? Or do you go through a metaphysical death, where you have to let go of some long-held belief? Something fundamentally has to change. And so that's what happened to me, not deliberately, but by default. And so I had to ask myself, you know, if money isn't the key to happiness, what the hell is? And this is where I embarked on my journey, trying to find answers. You know, I would fly to, being based in Australia, I would fly to America to attend programs, Singapore, Malaysia, where else did I go? Thailand, attending seminars, workshops, listening to all the gurus, trying to piece my life together and solve the puzzle that was me. And none of it added up to anything, I have to say. I think I got insights from all over the place, but there wasn't any kind of solution. But I did get one invaluable insight from a Face Your Fears boot camp. And we had to all undergo a near-death experience. And if you can just imagine, I probably wouldn't do this now, right? But back then I was prepared to do anything. Someone comes up to you and squeezes your carotid artery until you pass out, okay? So there I was, watching this guy covered in tats marching towards me, and thinking, oh, I wonder if I'll see the light, or I'll experience the euphoria that they talk about. And I was actually quite curious. But instead, as the lights of the convention hall went dim and blacked out, all I heard was a voice. And the voice said, Janet, you've let everyone down. And as I came to, I was just overcome by this tidal wave of, I can't describe it any better than to say it was disappointment. It was like, whoa, you mean after everything I've done, you know, being this absolute tireless mother, wife, worker, entrepreneur, doing crazy stuff, this wet sock of a line is a summation of my whole life. And that was quickly followed by outrage. which was then followed by, okay, I know exactly what this is. And I realized that I'd been living in a state of running away from myself and essentially denying the world my gift. Now, I wasn't that clear on what my gift was at that point, but what I was to discover was that my gift would be to help other people discover their gifts so they didn't have to go through the same travails that I did. And so the revelation I had, and I think this is, you know, that the whole concept of self-sacrifice is such a strong one in our society. I thought I was being selfless, but I was actually being selfish. And I don't know if any of you relate to this. Maybe you could just put R for relate in the chat. But when you really embark on a life of self-sacrifice, the inevitable cost of that is a feeling of resentment and bitterness and a checking out. And I realized looking back on that 30 years that I'd only been half there, as much as I felt that I was, you know, doing what everything was expected. Yeah, thanks, relate, yeah. And this was the big insight for me, that I had to start being about turning myself inwards to myself. This is actually a line from Oprah Winfrey, but I really resonate with it. The greatest betrayal of all is the betrayal of the self. And that tsunami of disappointment was that price, you know, way worse than a betrayal of another, that betrayal of the self where we keep ourselves buried. So this is where, yeah, Andrew, the classic martyr, exactly. We do that because we feel that there's a nobility around it. And it's not just women, it's men too. What about the men who go to war, you know, who sacrifice, who are willing to give their lives away for a cause that they're probably not even clear on, which might be a misrepresented cause. So that brings me to where I am now, to wake people up to who they really are. And I mean facing the dark side as well, not just climbing into the light, so that you can really bring back to life that unlived part of yourself. And this is when you step into your true power, not by trying to be someone else. So this is really why I do what I do. I think the question we have to ask is, you know, when someone says, just be you, you know, how frustrating is that? It doesn't mean anything. Why do we find it so hard to be who we are? What is that all about? So I'd like to share my theory with you on this to give you a little bit of clarity. And know that, I'll just say right now, there's a lot more to you than you think. we are complex creatures. I always thought if I did this inner work, I'd dive deep and find there was nothing there. That was my core fear. Anyway, let's just look at this from a more objective angle. Have you ever set yourself a goal and failed? So just put F for failure in the chat if that's you. Failure is such a loaded word. Yeah, just put F for failure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And what about the shame that accompanies that? It's not just the not getting what you want, it's the shame around it, that sense of, you know, what a loser am I, right? So I'm just going to put it to you that failure to achieve your dreams actually doesn't have anything to do with what's on the outside world. And it's very easy right now to go, it's all about what's out there. You know, pandemics, financial collapses, social isolation. Now, if it was all about that, I would not have any hope for humanity because our destiny would be at the mercy of things we can't control. But the good news is your destiny is totally up to you. How you want to end up in this world is totally within your hands. But there's stuff you have to know about yourself. And that's what I'm going to reveal. All right, so yeah, this is probably the most powerful thing you can ever know, is that the answers to everything that you need are already within you. They're not on the outside. So it's a matter of how do I access these, right? So I'm just going to take you through a quick quiz. So basically, when there's a misalignment with who we are and how we're showing up, it comes up as symptoms. And I'm going to, if you've got a piece of paper, I just want you to do a little checklist on yourself, a bit of a score. I'm going to read out a bunch of ways that life does not turn out for us. And I want you just to score yourself. You don't actually have to write the list down, but just like little notches. How many of these apply to you right now or have applied to you in your life? I'll just preface this by saying I can tick every one, okay? So there's a commonality here. The problem is when something happens to us where we are really at that doorway one, the overarching flavor of that is isolation. We think that we're the only one. It's like an isolation cell. But actually, what we don't realize is everyone is going through the same thing. So let's just keep a tally so that we start to get clarity on what not knowing ourselves actually costs. Okay, so you ready? I'll just go through this quickly. So have you ever suffered from or suffer from any kind of health problems and body pain, specifically being overweight, just put a tick or a 1, poor diet, not nourishing yourself properly, anorexia? I was an anorexic for a couple of years. I lived on apples and Diet Coke. Head or backache, anything like that, any kind of chronic pains and aches in your body. Looking at emotional issues, this is just a sample selection, right? Stress and anxiety. Sometimes the most anxious of us, we're so familiar with it, we don't realize we are anxious. Other people have to tell us. Feeling unbalanced. Do you ever feel unbalanced? Have you ever suffered from high blood pressure? It's not always hereditary. What about mood swings, rapid and severe mood swings? Have you ever experienced those? What about negativity or depression, where you just cannot do anything? There's just something that takes over. Just that feeling of being too tired, but it's nothing to do with just being, it's not natural tiredness, it's something else. Let's look at relationships. What about repeated relationship breakdowns? You know, have you been through a serial number of marriages, divorce? Or are you in a relationship where there's a lot of friction, where you're constantly blaming and arguing with the other and finger pointing? Our better half is inevitably our greatest punching bag. What about infidelity? Have you ever had maybe serial affairs? And either you or your partner, for that matter. Sometimes it's our partner, right? And then we think they're so bad and I'm so good. I'm the noble victim, but you're involved in this too. All right, the next one is, what about problems with career or profession? Have you ever had a business failure or loss? What about being in a career? Maybe you feel like this right now, feeling stalled, you know, with no promotion or development, just like you're stuck. What about major life choices that turn out to be big mistakes? For instance, marrying the wrong person, choosing the wrong career. Yeah, I would tick that one 6 times. The wrong lifestyle, you know, having a lifestyle that just doesn't serve you. All right. What about, do you ever find yourself unable to make decisions? Like you get into poor decision making, coming from fear, a state of confusion, choosing the wrong solution, being too impulsive. Just note that if that's the case. What about muddled thought processes? Just not having any clarity at all, just feeling absolutely confused. And the problem with that, when we're confused and we can't think clearly, we can't make decisions. And when we can't make decisions, we can't take action. So that's an issue that we have to sort through. What about any addictions to substances like alcohol, nicotine, drugs, any of those? What about behavior addictions, gambling, debt, racking up too much debt? That was definitely one of mine. Love addiction, or being a workaholic. Yeah, I know a lot of people relate to that. I'll just put a different slant on that too. Actually, I think we're all here to work and put out our energy. But when we're doing something that we really love, it gives us energy. So it's no longer like work, but we can still spend as many hours in the office. It just feels it's a totally different experience. Financial problems, yeah, so high debt or just any kind of debt that's crippling you, loss of income, bankruptcy. All right, so just notice how many of those you tick. If you like, enter into the chat just how many you did. I would have the highest score of anyone. This is not a shame list, it's just understanding the effect of what I believe is this thing I'm going to share with you in a second. It's all it is how it's showing up. So think of, I'm a little bit like a doctor and I'm just asking you to report back on your symptoms. Yeah. So 6, 5, 5. Yeah, so, well, you guys actually, your scores aren't that high, to be honest, compared to most people. But in a way, it only takes one or two things, right, to derail all of us. And we have to get to the bottom of that. So let's just look at that. So these are what I call the physical symptoms, right? Everything that I've talked about is what manifests in the physical world. But we know it's not just that, right? If we stayed in the physical world, if we were just physical beings, then all our problems would be caused by other physical events. But how disempowering is that? So what if they were caused by something else? What if they were caused by something that is actually beneath us? What if this was actually more like the tip of a giant iceberg? So what lies beneath the surface? All right. So directly affecting our physical world is our mental world. And I'm going to explain how that works in a second. There's something happening in between our ears that creates the physical outcome. All right. We have to find out what is that thing between our ears that's causing whatever it is, you know, business failure, relationship breakdown, whatever it is. Then this is what I call the core destructive belief, the CDB. But what created the CDB? What created the core destructive belief? And it always comes back to something in the next realm, which is our emotional realm. Okay. Always comes back to something that happened to us way, way back when we were not fully formed, typically between the ages of 0 and 7. But is that where it stops? Is that it? So we've talked about, you know, Think and Grow Rich. There are books out there on, you know, managing your mind. And, you know, there are books on emotional intelligence, managing your emotions. But is that what it's really all about? Is that the core? Or does it go one level deeper? What do you think the next level deeper might be? Just write it in the chat if you have any thoughts on that. Is there another state beyond the physical, mental, and emotional that we need to become aware of? Yeah, Andrea, absolutely. And this is where the world is starting to change. This is what we're starting to see. For the first time, spiritual awakening is trending upwards on Google. People are starting to acknowledge that there's more to us than the top 3 states, that there's a number 1 state, a spiritual state. So what is it that's happened to us at the spiritual level that has caused all these other knock-on effects, this domino effect? This is where we have to get to the bottom of ourselves. And this, I have to say, is the most exciting frontier of all. Way more interesting than Mars, because it's right here within us, and all we have to do is know how to access it. All right. So if you're interested in understanding a little bit more about this, because I don't want to share slides with you that might not be of interest, just put I for interested in the chat, because I can go a little bit deeper on this, and I'm happy to do that if you'd like to know more. So what lies behind this spiritual realm? Okay, so let's look at this. The spiritual realm is where we've experienced a state of being treated as someone that we know ourselves to be not. I call that a state of unlove in our early childhood. If we come into this world as loving energy, and then something happens to us that flies in the face of that, this is where we start to experience a spiritual crisis. Okay, so let's get to the bottom of that. Okay, so imagine this is a cross-section of your brain. I want you to think of your brain like a set of 3 drawers. Does that make sense? Okay, so the top level is our conscious self. And below that, we have the subconscious and unconscious. Now, a lot of people say, oh, well, hang on, isn't it just conscious and subconscious? Some people use that model. I follow the model of Carl Jung, who suggested there was a 3rd layer called the unconscious. So think of this as a set of 3 drawers. Okay. Now, these are just, take these as quite rubbery figures, but let's just say that the drawer that is least active or least used is the conscious brain, okay? And then the rest falls somewhere between our subconscious and our unconscious. So when people say you're only using, 10 or 5 or 2% of your brain, that's not true. Your conscious brain is that, but the rest of your brain is being well and truly used, absolutely. We are using 100% of our brain. It's just that the conscious part, the part that we're actually aware of, represents just a small part of that, okay? So what does it mean? So we're conscious. What are you conscious of right now? Just write in the chat what you're conscious of right now. It might be, very recent memory, what I had for breakfast or what I had for dinner, where I'm sitting at the moment, that I'm watching this masterclass. Just write down what you're conscious of right now. Why I'm here. That's great. If you're conscious of that, that's excellent. And I hope that would be my dream, Bruno, to bring that why I'm here to consciousness. You've just helped me articulate my mission. Thank you. All right. So yeah, this is what we're conscious of right now. Anything that's in our immediate frame of reference, right? The problem is we tend to make the mistake of thinking that our conscious brain is what's running our show, is what's making the decisions. Not true. Our conscious brain is the foot soldier. It's following instructions. The decisions are coming from somewhere else. We need to know where those decisions are coming from. Because once we do, everything starts to change. So let's look at our subconscious self. So say this is the second drawer. What's that about? So this is information that you can retrieve easily enough, whatever that is. It might be your mother's birthday or your phone number or pleasant memories of childhood. You know, oh, I remember that birthday party. You know, that's in your subconscious. So you don't need it all the time, but because it's kind of pleasant or neutral, it's easy to access. It's also things you do by second nature, you know, driving the car, having a shower, maybe making a cup of tea. You're not really, you're doing it from a subconscious point. You're not conscious necessarily of everything you're doing. Okay, so that's all pretty clear. But what about this part here, the unconscious? This basement of ourselves, I like to think of this as if we're looking at the three drawers, this is like your safe, right? And it's got a combination to it. And most of us don't know what that combination is. How do we unlock the things that are here? And the reason it stays locked in most of us is because this is where the painful parts reside. So let's look at that. This is where our childhood wounds are. Some people can remember traumatic events from their past. A lot of people, there's so much pain in it. There's so much pain surrounding it that they actually can't remember. I worked with a woman the other day. She couldn't remember anything before the age of 11. So this is quite common. So our job is, in this case, how do we get around this? So everything here is either hard or impossible to access. This is where our beliefs lie, our patterns, our attitudes. And we call this the personal unconsciousness, but there's another layer to it as well. It's not just what's happened to us and our particular pain points. It's also, it can be cultural. So it's a collective unconsciousness. So I was working with someone, an African American, about a year ago, and he kept saying, I'm nobody's slave, I'm nobody's slave. And I said, you've said this about 3 times. And so he was carrying around a shadow, if you like, of feeling like he was a slave, even though he was, in this world now, not 5 generations ago. So things can get passed down. And so it's like a belief or a thought pattern that impregnates us, and we just apply this context to it. So in his case, slavery for him was having a college degree because it carried so much debt. For his mother, slavery was not being educated, so having a college degree, that was freedom for her. So every generation having its own take on what this concept of slavery actually meant. And so when you think that this is unresolved and playing out, and so that's just one example, but all of us, everyone from whatever countries have collective unconsciousness. You go to Russia, it's got a very heavy energy. You go to Germany, it's got a heavy energy. What's that all about? So we inherit not only traumas from our past, but also from our environment. And this is what's so valuable if we can get to the bottom of this. All right. If this is making sense, I just need to know I'm not talking to myself. Can you just put MS in the chat, MS, for making sense, so I know that this is actually landing for you. Thank you. Excellent. Now, I think that the thing that's probably the biggest aha in all of this, of the 3 layers of how your mind is made up, it's this bottom layer that's actually driving your life. Okay. So just think about that. So if you have an unresolved childhood wound, something that happened to you, typically at the age of 5, it's actually that 5-year-old that's making decisions when you come under stress. Okay, so that's why we have to understand what this is all about. Okay, so let's just quickly go through this. So if we want to get to the bottom of this, this is the path. We have to identify the event, understand there's a negative emotion that's caused by that event. And why do we have to do this? Because of all the ways it shows up in our life going forward in our adult life. These are just some examples. What's behind all of this? What's the 4-letter F word that is behind all the things that happen to us in our life that we don't particularly want? Anyone just enter into the chat the 4-letter F word that lies behind financial loss, divorce, illness, stress, anxiety. Yeah, fear, absolutely. So our job is to go, okay, there's something missing. This is where I came to in my work. There's something missing between what happened to us as a child and the fear that we feel as an adult. I'm not talking about, you know, self-preservation. If we get chased by a tiger, we have to run. That fear is healthy. I'm talking about unhealthy fear. What creates that? And this is what I came to realize. So does anyone have any idea how many thoughts we think a day? Just enter in the chat if you've got any idea on that. Obviously, it's a lot. How many thoughts do we think a day? I'm going to put the number out here. It's anywhere, apparently, yeah, no idea, between 12,000 and 60,000. So a thought is just something that we're probably not even conscious. Yeah, 70,000, thank you. 10,000. Yeah, so between those two answers actually is how many thoughts. We're not conscious of every thought, but just think of these as instructions in your internal hard drive, okay? All right, now, anyone got any idea what percentage of those thoughts are negative? Just put it in the chat. What percentage of those, up to 60,000 thoughts a day, are negative? Do you have any idea? Yes, you got it, Bill. Yeah, 75, 85, yeah, I've got 80%. I'm sure these figures have a little bit of room for movement, but yeah, in other words, the vast majority. All right, here's what I came to realize, and this for me was the game changer. Okay, knowing all of that, point 3, of these negative thoughts, 95% are repeating the same thought or one of its offspring. 95%. So what does that mean? What if you could identify that one thought that's created all the others, all the limiting beliefs? What if you could identify that, and so start to turn around this negative behavior pattern that we all fall victim to? How amazing would that be? So there's one core reason I believe why most people will never fulfill their true potential, and unfortunately, is simply because of this. And I liken it to a mental termite that's actually eating away at the foundations of your inner being. So every time you go out to do something, there'll be a part of you holding you back. It's like you've got one foot on the accelerator and one foot on the brake, and all you can smell is that burning rubber on the road. And you're going, what the hell's going on? Why do I keep undermining myself? What is this all about? And I give this mental termite a name, and it's your core destructive belief. So our job as conscious humans is to get to the bottom, to go to that third drawer and identify what that is for us. And it doesn't matter how much work you've done. I did a process yesterday with someone who was an ex-Tony Robbins trainer. I can't tell you how much personal work he'd done on himself, and he hadn't identified his core destructive belief. And by going through this process, I was able to reveal it to him in such a big aha. So you can do a lot of work and you think you know it, but this is not something we can think our way through. This is something that we actually have to access, our innermost self. Why is it so important? Now, I'm just looking at the clock here. We're going to go a little bit over time. Is everyone happy just to spend an extra, say, 10 minutes or so, just while I go through this? If you can just put Y for yes, otherwise I'll skip right to the end. Okay, all right. Thanks, guys. It's just, okay, excellent. Thank you. I'd like you to understand this concept. I call it the crazy loop. I'm going to share my story so that you understand how it works, and you might want to relate it to your life. So basically what happens, it begins with a crime committed on us when we were very, very little, okay? Wasn't an intentional crime most often, but just something. So I was a very precocious, spoilt 4-year-old. I thought I was the apple of my parents' eyes. And the crime for me was the day when I saw my parents coming home with a little bundle, and I felt all the eyes in the room shift from me to this baby, which I thought they'd bought from a shop. And so in that instant, which I can remember as clear as if it happened yesterday, was a feeling of, oh, I wasn't good enough to make my mum and dad happy, right? So it's just an event like that. All right. To make matters worse, my sister had chronic colic. So she was crying all the time, and to drown out the noise, my mum would turn on the lawnmower. So for me, this was like the worst thing that had ever happened to us. And I thought, you know, there has to be a solution. We have to do something about this. So we went shopping 6 weeks later, and I found in the appliance section, I found all these price stickers. So I peeled them off the appliances, put them on my baby sister's forehead, thinking if they bought her from a shop, someone will buy her back. And anyway, when we got home, my mum just went, you know, she just was screaming at me. She was tired and overwrought anyway, but she just kept saying, you know, you naughty, naughty girl, you know, and we had the wooden spoon in those days. I don't know if you guys had that, or a belt or whatever. So she was chasing me with the wooden spoon, hitting me with that, sending me to my room. So what happened for me at that age? I felt this negative emotion, but I couldn't give it a name. I'd never felt it before. It was an absolute travesty in terms of who I thought I was. Suddenly this person I thought loved me was turning into this witch. And so the intensity of the emotion was so strong that I couldn't deal with it. I couldn't process it. And so I had to wrap it up in a belief that would make sense of this the next time it happened. So the next time she pulled out the wooden spoon, this belief would come up, and I'd go, yeah, but I already know that. So what was my core destructive belief? It was, I'm naughty. So every time I got into trouble, I went, yeah, well, that makes sense because I'm naughty. So what, right? Do you see how this starts to work? We have this as a defense mechanism. Okay, now the problem with that is that the core destructive belief creates fear. It's the source of our fear. That's why we have to get to know what it's all about. So my fear, my core fear, was getting into trouble. It started to shape, that fear started to shape all my behavior from that point. How do I not get into trouble? So this is where the other side comes in, which is where we spend most of our life in prison, as being our overcompensating self. So my overcompensating self did everything to not get into trouble. So I became the school prefect, the teacher's pet, you know, the class captain, and the goody two-shoes who got all the points right at school. I even became the milk monitor. I mean, it was unbearable. And so this is what I did. Now, I'm describing for you a pattern, and I want you to see if you can start to see the same pattern happening in your life. So what happens is we start to become addicted to this negative emotion, whatever it is, shame, guilt, anger. You know, you might have a clue as to what your core negative emotion is. We start to get addicted to that because it becomes a familiar part of us, right? Sound familiar? So what happens if part of us is addicted to shame, now we are the ones who are starting to commit the crime. So to give you the, you know, probably the most destructive example in my case of committing the crime, 2 years into my relationship with my current husband, we've been married 40 years, we were very in love. I had a one-night stand. Can you see this? I'm naughty, starting to play out. I had no idea why I was doing this, but something just came to the fore in me. And the shame that I felt after that, it was just enormous. You know, it's like looking in the mirror and going, you are a worthless slut. You know, it was just like, just right to the heart. And so what I did, what happened, this fear of getting into trouble comes into play. And so for the rest of really the next 30 years, I imprisoned myself, not in my bedroom anymore, but behind a desk. And so I just committed myself to being, you know, this great mother, the great wife, the great worker. And we swept this whole incident under the rug of our marriage. We never talked about it, but there was always something toxic going on. Anyway, this crazy loop repeated out for me many times over. I won't go into all the other instances. this core destructive belief was essentially running my show, playing with the overcompensating self. So just put in the chat after relate if you're aware that you might have a similar pattern going on in your life. Because I believe it's just about impossible to break until we become aware of it. It's not something we can think our way through. Yeah. And I want you to know also that it's absolutely normal. And part of our initiation as humans is to become aware of it and bring what's unconscious to our conscious self. Okay, so my job is really to expose and deactivate that for you so you can start to understand what's been driving you. I don't know that we're going to have time for this to reveal the model. I'll just go through it quickly, okay? But basically, it's a very simple process. We go to our dark side, we have to go to our unconscious self, and here we reveal the three things you need to know about yourself: your core fear, your core destructive belief, and your overcompensating positive belief. These are aspects of you. They're not bad, right? And we're not trying to get rid of them. They're hardwired. We just need to bring them to the surface. And what happens when we do that, when we can bring them to the surface and make the unconscious conscious, then suddenly you realize the truth that is neither of those things. Yeah, there's a bit of me that's naughty, but it's not my identity. There's a bit of me that can be very effective, but the overachiever perfectionist, but that's not my identity. We have to get to our identity that lies somewhere in the middle. And then when we can do that, this is where this wonderful sense of equilibrium happens. This sense of being at one with ourselves. And from here, we can go from a state of being in pain to actually feeling passion again. We start to come to life. And from there, we can take our passion and put it out there into the world as our power. So how many of you would be interested in just seeing the first step on this? Because I'll go straight to there. I had another case study, but I don't want to waste your time. But yeah, if you're interested in what this could look like, this is what I'd like to share with you. So essentially, let's just do a recap. What we've done today is I've shown you the fifth door model. You've got a sense of where you might be in your life right now. You can see that there's something at play here that's working beneath the surface, this crazy loop. Everyone has one. No one gets out of jail free. And that there is a way through this. I don't know anyone else who is doing this work, but I can tell you I've taken hundreds of people through this and it works and they get on with their life. And for me, it's the most important piece of personal development work you can do. So what now? What I'm going to do, I was just going to share with you some people who I've helped with this, but I'm not going to do that because I don't want to waste time. I'm just going to go straight to what my offer is. My offer to you is to get you going on the first step. And what the first step is to actually get you clear on your vision, what you really want, your mission, how you're going to get there, and what your ultimate purpose is. And I'm also going to offer with this a one-on-one call with me where I can help you analyze your results, but I have to limit it to 6 people, obviously, because we go deep. The big offer is I'm not even asking you to invest anything more than your time at this stage. My whole desire is to help people give clarity. So this is something that I can share with you that doesn't even involve any physical, financial expenditure. It's just to help you start to get clear on the first step, which is your core need. So if you're interested in that, if you'd like, Ben, if you could just share the link with the room on that. Yeah, if you click that, you can register for that. It's going to ask you for your name and your email address. Obviously, I've already got that, but that's so that you can get the results sent to you. All I would say is if you do this exercise, give yourself time, do not rush it, and just focus on the things that you need right now, not what you already have, but things that you need that are outside of you right now. Okay, and then I can follow up, and if you're one of those 6, if you can send through the results, then we will. If you're one of those 6, I'm happy to go through that with you and just explain actually what it means. So there's the link there. Before we wind up, I'd just like to say the one problem I see over and over again. Anyone got any idea what it is? What's the one problem I see over and over again? The thing that stops people actually becoming who they have the potential to be. So thanks, Coralie. Coralie's just sharing that she already did this exercise. Yeah, it's uncanny, isn't it? There's a lot to it for something that takes so little time. Yeah, the one problem I see over and over again is just inaction. So yeah, thanks, Andrea. Yeah, we're taking action. So just, this isn't for me, this is for you. Do yourself the favor of just starting to take a first step. You took the first step just being here in the first place, and that's wonderful. And I really, you know, applaud you for that. So this is a constant path. So just take the next step. The next step will give you some more clarity. And basically, you have this choice. You can go the old way or the new way. And the old way, I know, because I tried the old way over and over again, and it just kept me costing me more and more. There is a new way. If you have any background fear of doing inner work, thinking, or you might have done therapy and gone, oh, it didn't work for me, this is not that. This is a process. I did therapy and I hated it. I hated the long-winded nature of it, the fact there was no outcome, the fact that it just seemed to go on forever and ever. And my whole goal is to get you from where you are now to where you're essentially free of what's been holding you back. If I can achieve that for you, I die a happy person. So finally, when's the best time to plant a tree? Well, to enjoy its shade and the fruit and all of that, probably 20 years ago. I remember thinking I'd left my run too late, and that's not at all true. The second best time, there's always a second best time, and that's to actually start right now. And there's a beautiful expression on that though no one can go back and make a brand new start, anyone can start from now and make a brand new ending. I'm about to turn 60, and it's only at the age of 55 that I found my true calling. It is never too late, and I'm having the most fun I've ever had, and that future awaits you. If you're not experiencing that right now, that future awaits you. It's never too late. In fact, think of it as an investment. Everything that you've suffered, every pain point you've suffered up to this point is a wonderful investment in your whole cavalcade of experience that you will be able to draw on. Everything happens at the right time, but it's never too late. So with that, I'd like to say that this masterclass is officially ended. Just enter in the chat anything that you got out of this that was valuable, the most valuable thing that you got out of this masterclass, just so I can get that feedback. And I do hope that you do this exercise and get some clarity on your core need. Would love to register. Okay, we'll follow you up, Bruno. Yeah, thank you, Bill. All right. Okay, everyone, thanks for coming. And I look forward to seeing you on the other side where we can discuss your core needs. Bye for now.